All right. Happy Monday. It's nice to see all your faces. Hope everyone had a nice weekend. Um, Looks like there's only 1.5 items on the agenda today. So we could start with the first one, which is the 12.3 milestone. So key date for product and engineering is the 22nd, which is today. I'm supposed to have the milestone, ideally everything in there that we want to work on. And then by the first, for engineering, we want to make sure that we mark any items that are accepted as with deliverable, and then that'll make its way through the proper paths. It'll make it into the kickoff document. It'll make it onto the kickoff call. But yeah, the first thing being starting today, and then by the first having everything accepted and in the deliverable tags. So I have the link there. I won't share my screen, but I could just go over each item that's in here. I'm looking in that link, the deliverable column. The first item in there is actually, it's being worked on already by GG. This is the deleting tag, deletes all tags with the same image ID. This one is goes really well with what Nick's working on right now with the multi-select, but basically the Docker API is limited in that you can't select a single tag for deletion with the API. So a bunch of users in the issue suggested some workarounds where we create a fake tag and then move and then delete that one. Sounds like this is in progress, and GG's pretty far along based on the last stand-up report that I've seen from him. But any questions on this one?
So he was, last update, I had a quick chat with Gigi yesterday. He mentioned that he was sort of trying out some ideas that he felt like would work. And he created an MR yesterday just because he said he had some sort of prototypes that he was playing with. I had a quick chat with him and we pinged you and then I think Steve just to see. So if you follow up with him in the Slack chat, that would be awesome. You probably did already, and I just missed it. I just got up for meetings this morning. So yeah, so that seems like it's coming along. He felt like it was pretty straightforward. So I feel like we'll probably get something done on that.
I'm really excited about that one. That was one I thought we were going to have to wait a long time to get to. It's nice that we'll be able to just work around it, and I think it's going to be really valuable, especially with that multi-select delete. That's going to really transform things.
It's great when you have actual people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's awesome. The next one I'm unsure about. So and I'm open to conversation on this one. So we have the consumption, basically the data tracking for package. I worked through this milestone to find out that we are currently tracking page views for GitLab.com, but not for self-serve. So we are tracking some page views that we can add to a dashboard, and I'm gonna work on that in this week, probably just trying to get so we get some view into our stage, what's going on. But there are a bunch of other metrics that are not page views that we want to track. Things like the number of build or push events that happen with the container registry, or the number of each time an account of the image is deleted from the UI. They're put in priority order in the issue. I bet for this upcoming milestone, if we work through the P2s, that would be awesome. I just don't have a whole lot of insight into how the data tracking works, what needs to be done, and what the intricacies are. So I feel like there's a bit of investigation that probably needs to happen. But I think it's important because, like, right now for this milestone, I'm trying to prioritize a Maven feature over an NPM feature. And I don't really know. I suspect NPM is more popular, but I don't know that for sure. So it would be good if we could start to think about this.
Yeah, what format do you want to start thinking about this in, Tim? What's going to be useful to
you? I think if we knew, even if we added one metric, if we added something like the number of build events for the container registry, I think that would give us a really good sense of, okay, this is how we do it. It goes in Snowplow or it goes in usage ping. Here's the process of how it gets approved. And then from there, I think we can prioritize other metrics as we're building things and pick things off the list. That to me seems like it would be maybe the lowest investment with the most fruit, but I'm happy to hear other opinions too.
Have you worked through this before, Darby, at all?
Yeah, I have, in fact. So the way we did this on release, we basically took the metrics that we wanted to gather, and then try to figure out how we would get that from the app code. So it was, what kind of active record query can we run to get this data, and like, is that query going to cause any problems? Is it a huge selector? Is it something that's indexed or whatever? And so I think we picked 5 metrics or whatever it was, and then we figured out what those queries were going to be, and we figured out that a couple of them we couldn't get given the current database architecture, and so we just punted on those. And then we I've got an MR somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. That shows how to like wire this into the usage ping, which is just what I ended up doing with those. The usage ping is actually pretty easy to work with. But I think the harder part is figuring out how to get those metrics that you want. But then once you have that, you can just add it to the usage ping. There's no approval or anything that has to happen. You just add the item in, and it gets just rolled up into the payload. So I'll try to link this MR.
Yeah, I've looked at that. I actually saw that MR. You linked me to that a while ago when we first started talking about these usage stats. I think maybe where we're missing it here is that we kind of conceptually we've got to write it in the app code and all that sort of stuff, but sort of identifying where in the application code we need to add the line for a specific metric is kind of like, it's about understanding the code base. And I'm not sure we understand the code base at that level because we're all quite new.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know whether I feel like once we see your template, which again, I've looked at already, I think it was a while ago, so I'm not saying I clearly understand it or anything, but it will be that feeling of like, okay, but which metric's important? Like you said, okay, where would that live in the app code? Okay, how do we add an issue for that specific line of code when we're not even sure what that looks like right now? And so
yeah. So and that's gonna require some input from engineers that have probably worked on this stuff, because there isn't like a clear understanding of the data model. At least, like, if I go and look at something, I can look at it and say that seems to make sense if I look in the schema, but then someone with some experience is going to say, yeah, actually that's almost right, except you need to filter on this other, active state value or something like that. And so what I would probably do is take a first pass best guess at what the thing would be, and then run it by the engineers that have worked on that stuff, and just get them to double check it.
Yeah. Okay. So that what maybe makes sense, Steve, given that you're the person with their hands in the back end of the code the most, and welcome. Maybe what makes sense is actually looking down that list of items for a second, just ignoring the priority just for a second, and then have a look down and see if there are any items you feel like you actually kind of go, oh, I kind of think I know I've touched that code base that relates to that. Then we can figure out a way forward. Just even if it's not the top priority, at least we're sort of moving the bar and understanding how the process works. And then in the meantime, we can also tie that up against the priority items as well and say, okay, well, let's look at this. What would we need to know in order to do this? What would need to be true? In the words of a great product manager who we work with. His name is Tim. Welcome, Tim.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll take a look and make a couple notes on what I see.
And I'm happy to set up a meeting with Jeremy, who's on the managed team, who's working a lot on the analytics piece and may have specific engineers that have done in-depth versions of this before. So I'm happy to set up a meeting if it'll help.
And I think, sorry to interject there, but Darby actually did his own MR for this. So Darby's also a point of reference. But again, it's that knowledge of the code base. Of where, okay, so we need a metric that tells us how many times a package is downloaded, right? knowing where that line of code needs to go to write that somewhere is actually the area that we're trying to fill in here. And so that's why I'm suggesting Steve go just sort of look around those items and go, oh, okay, I've worked with that piece of the code base. I think that needs to go here, and then we can start from there, at least from a known,
I just linked the release issue in the chat here. So you can take a look at the way we worked through this. We pretty much did all this work in the issue, but essentially, like I made a first pass at like, here's what I think these things should be, and then Shinya and Alessio kind of commented on, yeah, here's how you want to get the data, and then here's places that we don't have it yet, and then yeah, so you can kind of like read through that process. And then there is also, I think the MRs that I added were, yeah, they're in the related MRs, so you can see the actual changes to the usage ping classes to make those changes. So, but feel free to hit me up if you get into the weeds with any of this and have questions.
That's awesome. Thank you, Darby. It's really helpful. Okay. The next two issues that are on the list, they are issues that came from the HackerOne bug report. They have to, I'm not sure we're supposed to talk about them since this video is public and those are confidential issues. But you can open them and you can see the report and what they're related to. I think they're pretty straightforward, but let me know if I need to add in any details or anything like that. But knowing that these were identified as P3S3 bugs and they were identified, they're due in basically August and September. I figured that we should prioritize them now so we can meet those deadlines. Okay. Okay, then the next one, it's one that Nick opened. It's kind of a meta issue right now, I'd say, Nick. It improved the container registry UI. We have some good suggestions in there, but I think we could do more to turn it into something concrete for this release. And open to opinions and feedback here. But one thing Daniel and I were talking about was what's the data model, like what data do we need to surface in the UI for the different features? So I was thinking about it as maybe a separate issue could be, instead of just sending the UI examples that I thought from some of our competitors, to actually identify like, okay, here's the data we want. We want the branch information, we want the last commit, we want ideally the information from the manifest in there. And then once we identify that and where that data comes from, that could help solidify how we design the user interface. And I thought that would be a good task for Nick and Ian and I to work through, sort of like figuring out what information needs to be there and then figuring out how to architect that information into the user interface. And then once we have that, we could test that with some of the users as well, because then we could prototype it and say, okay, how does this presentation look to you? That's how I was thinking about tackling that problem. What do you guys think? What do you all think? Sorry.
I think that sounds neat, Tim.
Okay. Okay. Nick, do I sense some hesitation?
No, I was going to agree as well. I think that's a pretty good approach that we could take there. Because I at this moment in time, I'm quite unsure about what data is available and how hard it is to get hold of. So if we have the answers to those questions, that will help drive UI decisions that we can actually implement rather than just dream about. So yeah, I'm all for it.
I'm wondering in the feature, I see the GitLab API has some of this information available. Like for our users could ping the API and find out what the branch is or the commit is. Does that work on our front end? Can our front end ping the GitLab API? Like,
I assume so, but I've not seen an example of it.
Sorry, Tim, are you referring to like the front end? I missed that for a second. I was reading.
Yeah, I was looking through the GitLab. I was trying to figure out what data was available, and I was just looking through the GitLab API itself, and I was like, well, we we have project and branch and commit info and all this stuff that's available from the API, but I don't know if we're making it available on the container registry UI, the front end. And I don't know if is it a true statement that if the GitLab API exists, that the front end can access it? That's maybe a more direct way of asking.
I would assume so, but it sounds almost like we're not trying to solution this, but it sounds almost like the data exists in different areas. We would kind of need to aggregate that together. It's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put together the information and we can go from there. Okay. Cool. But thank you, Nick, for putting that issue together. I was some really thoughtful ideas in there that were cool.
So, sorry, Tim. Ian, were you going to say something before you went off mute real quick and then you stopped?
No, I thought I was going to say something and then I decided against it. But if we know what data is available, that's kind of the question I had around this was, if we already know what data is available, there's some really easy testing to figure out how users will prioritize it. So do we know if that's a finite list of what's available, or is that part of the exploration we have to do?
It's part of the exploration. It's part of the exploration. I think we basically what I'm intending in is for us to go through some of the user research and hear about the different things that people are expecting to see, and then combine that with some of the competitive research that we've seen. Like I really like some of the things that CodeFresh has in their UI. So we could use that as an example. And what's the correlation to the GitLab product? Once we identify that, then I agree. Then we could, it's just a question of, okay, well, where does all that information belong? And some of that we'll have to say, like, I know for a fact I don't think we're storing the Docker manifest info or Docker labels. That's things that could be really useful for the user, but we're not storing it yet. So that would be a separate issue to say, okay, start collecting and storing this data, and then eventually we'll expose it on the front end.
Gotcha.
And I think the general idea that Tim and I were talking about was just sort of the data architecture question and that deciding, like, because the way I think about it is like there's two sides to a data question. Is like, one is what do we actually have, and two is what do our users actually want and / need. And you know, ideally those things match up and yay, we're all happy. But if they don't, then we've got, you know, potential work to do in terms of adding new metrics or convincing users that, or satisfying, let me say it in a better way, satisfying that user need in some other manner.
That makes sense.
But I think I know we need to start rethinking the user experience for not just the container registry, but for NPM and Maven and Conan as well, for what information we share and how people move through the app. So it all starts with the data. And if we could identify what those are, then we can figure out how to move it around and show users. But it would be nice and we could reach out to the users that we interviewed already probably, and then do like a user study where we ask them to click through things and see how it works. Okay. So I actually moved up this card, identify the data required to redesign the package UI. So that one's assigned to Ian and I think we have enough to start on that. Okay, the next one is a follow-up to some of the NPM authentication work that we've been doing in 12.2. This is for authenticating with the CI job token for the NPM registry. I have some questions on this. I couldn't find out from my own research if the CI job token supports OAuth, if we have to make the same change that we had to the personal access token, which I think, Steve, we just had to change the header for how it's delivered. But I don't know if that same change will work for CI job token or not. So I just have this one up here. I have what we want to do, but I'm not sure how it actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, that would require just a little investigation to see how those tokens are different. But if they're similar to the personal access tokens, then it should be a very similar change. Okay.
Let's investigate that. And if it's not similar or if it's not done, then we could move it out of the milestone. Users do have a workaround for this. It's not ideal because they have to use their own generated OAuth token, and then they can't have two-factor authentication enabled. So it's problematic. it'd be nice to have CI job token, but if it's a big change or it's really involved, then I would say we could have them working with the workaround for a bit longer.
Cool.
Okay, the next one up there is support Helm charts in the GitLab container registry. This should really have an MVC next to it or something. Helm v3 was announced. It's coming out in the stable release, I think, in August or September. Microsoft has already worked with Helm to launch Helm charts in their container registry. The big change that happened was Helm was using, I'm probably going to mess this up, but Helm was using Tiller as the backend to sort of do the user management and to store the files. Now they've just switched to the container registry. There's a blog post I shared in the ticket where they talk about why they did that and how really the container registry just holds files, so it can hold Helm chart files, no problem. And in this issue, a couple of our users have been saying, well, I'm already using the container registry this way. It's already working. There's no problem with it. So for this issue, I thought we could go through what those users showed what they're already doing, document how to do it, and add that documentation to there's some container registry examples in our documentation so we could add a piece to that. And I suspect there's some front-end changes that will come out of that as well. I saw for the user that they weren't having the data populated for size, for example, I think was one of the fields that was missing. So it's really more of a get it working, document it, and then figure out what needs to be added to the front end to make it function nicer.
I added MVP to the title, just so you know.
Thank you. Yeah, because yeah, exactly. But this is a nice, easy win for us, and it's something that we can, I don't know how big of an announcement that Helm v3 will make in the tech industry, but it's enough that I really liked how GitHub announced, support for Swift in their package registry during the Apple conference. I'd love to do the same thing for Helm, announce it during their conference that we supported as well. Any questions on that one? No. Okay. The next one is for basically similar to the work that we just did that Steve just did for NPM for subgroups, doing the same thing for Maven. So being able to support multiple groups and subgroups for Maven, and with that, ideally we would change how we handle naming conventions for the Maven repository as well. So this issue itself is not too popular, but the naming convention thing, we have a couple of issues about that. So I think we could change both with one issue. This one I've not fleshed out yet, so if you're reading this issue, it doesn't have the description. I apologize. I'm going to work on that today. But Steve, do you have any questions or comments on that?
No.
No. Anyone else? Good. Okay. This one is an extension of our packages API. So we don't have the ability now to list all of the packages that exist at the group level. This is a highly requested feature, and also I think this will be a big step for us towards adding a group, improving our group level view in the user interface itself. Although we do have some group level view now, right, in the UI, Nick, for the NPM.
Yeah, there is on the group level. I didn't realize it didn't list full packages though.
Maybe the front end, so maybe this one needs some investigation. Like we just don't expose this API endpoint then, but we have it for ourselves for the front end.
Yeah, I think this is specifically referring to the API for external use, rather than the internal front end back end setup that we would use for displaying packages.
Okay, so yeah, just basically it may not be creating a new one. It's more just exposing something that we already have and making it public.
Yeah. The external API, those are set up separately because like they're set up as like API endpoints, whereas the GitLab internal stuff is not necessarily using an API. It's just, like model view controller kind of deal.
Okay. Any other questions on this one, Dan, or no? Looks good.
I updated the title. I was winning on the title updates this morning.
Okay, I can refresh so I could see it.
You could totally iterate on the title change.
That's perfect. Thank you. I like it.
Yeah, no worries. We're running a little low on time, so I just want to make sure we're getting through stuff here.
Okay, two more. Steve, this one was your issue that we brought forward. This addresses a problem with some of the changes we made recently to NPM with how we handle the logic for duplicate names. And basically, we want to warn a user when they attempt to change the path of projects. I didn't know if you wanted to bring this into this iteration. I think it could wait to the next one if we wanted to, depending on your workload. But
yeah, I think there's not necessarily a hurry. This is behavior that's always been there. It's not something that's changed recently. But if a user moves a project or changes the names of these things, it will break the connection. So that's the main concern, and they may not realize that that's why.
Okay, I'm okay if we wait till the next milestone if it's feeling like we have a lot going on in this one. And then the last one is this sorting issue, which I know I'm pushing for, maybe a little too hard for maybe. I hope that we can create value for the user in this. But there are performance implications of sorting in the container registry UI. We've never tested those really. We don't know where the performance problems start. I came up with a proposal for only sorting the first page, and then anything with more than one page, don't sort it, basically. And I don't have data to say the majority. I would like to say the majority of users have less than one page of tags, but I don't have the data to say that. So this is just a hunch. But I think this would be a big value add for our users. Like when in each of the user interviews, when I asked them the question of how are they using the user interface, they were like, well, why is it sorted this way? This makes no sense. Like I could pull out a quote from each video. So this would be something that would be valuable, even if we could solve a little bit. And we've been going back and forth on this issue. Any questions or comments on this one? No. I know we're running out of time. I think we need some more front-end issues as well. I'm noticing as we're going through, a lot of these changes are back-end. I'd like to work through find a couple more front-end issues with Ian here that might be more helpful.
Do you have a chat scheduled with John already, Tim, coming up soon?
I do not for this week, but I can.
Probably worth setting that up, and might be worth inviting Nick as well. Just have everyone there that needs to be there. If it's a useful meeting for you, Nick, also remember GitLab rules. You can decline if you don't feel like it's going to be useful. So
yeah, I'd like to. That sounds good. I'll do that, and Ian can be there as well, because I think it's going to be a big piece to making our front end issues look really nice and work really well. But we just need to find where we invest the time.
Sounds good.
Okay. I used up all of our time. I apologize, Dan. I know you wanted to talk about.
Totally fine. No. Let's call it 8 o'clock. Everyone's got other stuff to do, so we can. I can follow up with the team otherwise. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.